Well, welcome. This is part two of the Great American Cholesterol Scam. And I'm just presenting a concept about Wellness University tonight, too, just so you can get that idea. So I'm going to go, what we talked about last month was a little bit about how cholesterol got targeted at the beginning, and we're just not going to go over those things. For those who weren't here last month, the 5 major studies that ended up coming up in the 1980s that didn't support cholesterol, we went over that, why cholesterol isn't seen to be an issue, and how Big Pharma manipulates the healthcare system with their assistance with quality assurance and funding and all those sorts of things, and how we introduced the idea that the 4 major horsemen of cardiac disease are really not cholesterol, but oxidation, inflammation, glycation, and stress. So I'm going to do a little bit of overlap to catch those folks who weren't here last month, and I think we went over enough material last month that people would probably appreciate having it told twice anyways. Yes? Dan says it's being recorded, and yes, I think it was recorded last month, and it's sent to a business that has to take my waving arms out and coordinate the talk with the slides. So this will be put on the net too, so that'll eventually be available on the web. So, and what's Wellness University is a concept we're talking about. Us guys in Wisconsin Integrated Medical Society, WIMS, are talking about how can we start promulgating and creating the language and culture of wellness. There isn't a language or a culture to talk about. We're also used to thinking of healthcare as something you go to get when you get sick, that we haven't talked about and put together the whole intellectual construct and idea and language and the word tools to create what does it take to keep well. Anybody who's here tonight has already intuitively figured out that's what you want to do, and that's what brings you here. But we haven't figured that out fully. So we're trying to say, is there a defined body of knowledge that we can put together that if you had it, you'd be pretty comfortable taking care of yourself? Well, what we're trying to do is we've said we've got 12 core lectures and 10 optional lectures. And what you're hearing tonight is one of the optional lectures. When you've had all 12 of those, when you've had those 12, you've got a pretty good foundation for taking care of yourself. It's my humble opinion that every kid graduating from high school ought to have those 12 lectures, but the problem is the fields are changing so quickly, we're just learning how to do it. In any case, you're going to hear one of the optional ones, so stay tuned. We hope to be adding more of those lectures here coming in the future. We'll give you a structure, and we'll even give you a transcript, and we can check off that you got the cholesterol one tonight. So my practice, just to let you know what I am, I'm in private practice at what's called Brookfield Longevity and Healthy Living. That's at 17585 West North Avenue. And for anybody who has a pop quiz, my address is on there too, so you can see it on there. And I'm board certified in so many things I don't know how to count anymore. But I've also got a master's degree from the University of South Florida, the first medical school in America to give a master's degree in nutrition to doctors. And I was in their first class, and so I'm the first doctor in Wisconsin to have that. My mother is very proud of me. I also have an advanced fellowship in holistic cancer care and advanced fellowship in endocrinology. So let's just jump into the lecture though. So what we want to talk about tonight, the endocrinology of food, as we start with that. Every metabolic event in your body is controlled by hormones. And the food we eat are part of the most powerful hormonal effect your body can have. And food, we've always thought of, you have been trained to think of food as calories. You look at ice cream and say there's fat and sugar and maybe a touch of protein. Well, we all think of food as the 3 macronutrients, fat, protein, and carbohydrates. Well, we need to also think that food isn't just calories. There's also micronutrients in it, and it's also those macronutrients have incredibly powerful hormonal effects on you. So we really need to think of food as the most powerful drug you ever take. And if you eat your meals just without thinking about that, you're missing an opportunity to manage your own metabolism. Because really the hormonal changes that food causes are hundreds of times more potent than virtually any drug we can take. So once we understand that concept and realize that the food we take and the proper management of food is more powerful than virtually anything else. Now I've seen various studies done, some that show things like if you're dealing with diabetes, lifestyle change is 4 to 5 times more effective than any chemical, any drugs all put together. So anybody who's on diabetes medication, lifestyle changes are 4 to 5 times more potent in terms of effectiveness than any other drug. So insulin, the hormone that seems to affect the most with glucose metabolism is insulin. And I was trained in medical school to say, if you asked any doctor, if you go to any of your doctors today and say, what does insulin do? They will say, it is your blood sugar controlling hormone. It lowers your blood sugar. And you're going to say in the back of your mind, gee, he's still old school. Because that's how we all got trained. We've all been trained to say insulin lowers your blood sugar. And I'm going to say, wipe that idea out of your brain and put in this idea. Insulin is your storage hormone. It's the hormone designed to put extra calories into storage. And we're going to go through that in a little more detail. It responds to carbohydrates very rapidly. We were all trained that it controls your blood sugar. You eat carbohydrates, in response to that you put out insulin. That's in fact what happens. But what time of year do you have carbohydrates? What time of year do you have carbohydrates? If you're Carbohydrates are foods that grow on green plants for 4 months, and so at the end of summer, at the beginning of fall. So if you go to the farmer's market, you find potatoes ripen in August, September, October. Corn shows up in the market in August, September, October. Pumpkins ripen in August, September, October. Apples show up in August, September, October. Carbohydrates are foods that ripen. What follows October? When you go to the farmer's market in November, what do you find at the farmer's market? Nothing. They closed. We had a frost in November, everything went away. If you're a hunter-gatherer, what food are you eating in November, December, January, February, March, April?
Squirrels.
The answer would be nothing. Squirrels. If you come to my house, you can get rabbits and squirrels. Actually, if you come to my yard, you can get deer too, which I'd be quite fond of to get rid of. So insulin's job is the hormone that responds to carbohydrates at the end of summer that puts calories into storage. And you want calories to go into storage at the end of summer because following November comes December, January, February, March, which if you haven't stored calories, you aren't going to live through those months. So insulin is an incredibly helpful hormone. But fundamentally its job is to store calories. And fat cells storing a fat cell that's in the process of storing calories can't share calories. So anybody who's trying to lose weight can't lose weight when they're storing calories because you're gaining weight with that. So insulin shuts fat cells tight shut. Insulin is the lock that tells fat cells you're shut. So if you eat any foods that secrete insulin, your fat cells are now shut. All right. So here's the annual food timeline. I've now given you all the clues. From March to July, you're a hunter-gatherer 1,000 years ago living in Wisconsin. What food can you find from March to July? A hunter-gatherer finds green plants, stems and leaves, spinach and asparagus, green plants, broccoli, dandelion leaves, other such delightful, delectable, those are sort of carbohydrates, but most green plants are about 50% protein, and their carbohydrates released very, very slowly. All right? From July to October or November, you find carbohydrates, apples, pumpkins, or every other food that we call a carbohydrate. And so we can define civilization as the ability to take carbohydrates and store them and so that they're available throughout the year. And the pinnacle of civilization becomes pick and save, where you can buy apples anytime you want because we have 747s that fly them from Chile and Argentina and South Africa, so we can get whatever carbohydrates we want any time of the year. And we have silos where we store wheat and we can make bread, and you can get bread anytime. So civilization has allowed us to take carbohydrates and make them year-round. But that's not what we used to do. From November to March, the only food available to a hunter-gatherer is, and you've got to be able to catch it. And not every day can you catch it. And if you can't catch it, do you want to feel weak and crummy? Or do you want to have the energy to be able to chase that thing across miles and miles of countryside so you can catch it? You want to be able to have energy, right? So you want to have a metabolism that works successfully while you're doing that. So the question on the timeline, carbohydrates appear what time of year? One more time, a little. Okay, and what follows carbohydrate time? Winter. Who's going to survive winter better? The person who stores calories, the person who doesn't? Okay. What do you want your body to do? And so what you want your body to do in September is store calories. And the hormone that makes you store calories is? All right. And what percent of the year do you think you have carbohydrates? About maybe a quarter or a third. Did you know that green plants are 50% protein and very, very low glycemic index, so insulin doesn't respond to that very low, all right? And so we're designed to eat carbs for 2 to 3 months a year only, not 12. All right? The problem is in modern civilization, is anybody here who doesn't like ice cream? Or is there anybody here who would like to not have a candy bar or like not to have? We love carbohydrates. When you eat a slice of bread, what do you do? When you eat an Oreo cookie, what do you do? Is there anybody here ever been able to stop at one Oreo cookie? Okay. Or one Girl Scout cookie. Actually, Girl Scout cookies are even more deadly. All right. So insulin is your storage hormone, your survival hormone. If you don't store, you don't make it through the winter. It means carbs are here, it's time to store. And when you have carbs, your brain says what? When you eat carbs, your brain says it's fall, and so my whole metabolism goes into storage mode. All right? So you also say eat more and eat fast. So when you eat carbohydrates, if you eat peanut butter, Skippy peanut butter, that's 30% of the calories in it are from fructose, what do? You eat a tablespoon of Skippy peanut butter and you immediately eat a second tablespoon of Skippy peanut butter. Right? At least I do. When you eat organic peanut butter, what do? You spend the next 5 minutes getting off the roof of your mouth. And it didn't taste that good anyways. And so you chew it for a while and you say, I'm full. So why do you think the food manufacturers put butter and sugar in Skippy peanut butter? Because you eat more when you get that wonderful sweet flavor. So, what's the insulin trap? I'm spending a lot of time on this because this is critical to carbohydrate, insulin, and statins, and we're going to get to statins. So what's the insulin trap? The insulin trap goes as follows. Creation designed you to have a blood sugar of 70 to 80. So let's say your blood sugar is 70. And I give you one slice of bread, one piece of toast for breakfast. Your piece of toast is free carbohydrates you digest quite quickly, so the glucose gets into your blood quite quickly. So for about 3 hours, you have upward pressure on blood sugar. Your blood sugar is only 80 and it went up to 92. No big deal. But that upward pressure makes you put out some insulin because it went up quite quickly and your body's quite sensitive to that relatively rapid rise. And so you put out insulin. So your blood sugar only up to 95. That lasted 3 hours. But you put out insulin. Insulin gives you downward pressure. The problem is that it gives you downward pressure for 8 hours. And what happens in these 5 hours? You've got a mismatch. Suddenly you've got downward pressure without calories, which means your brain says, I'm starving you, idiot, you're killing me. Go find food. That's called brownie-seeking behavior. Okay? Your fat cells and liver are competing for glucose with muscles and brain, and your brain is starving. Your muscles feel weak. So what do? You find calories. So 10 o'clock in the morning, anybody here feel the need for a donut? Right, we all do. The problem is, if you've got to eat an extra, you put in, because you ate 100 calories here of free glucose, you put 20 calories into storage. And you needed 100, but 20 went into storage, so you're 20 short. So you got to eat 20 just to break even. And you gain 20 calories every day, and every 150 days you've gained a pound. And every 300 days you've gained 2 pounds. And everybody in this room has gained 2 pounds a year for the last 30 years. And that's what happened when we put our food pyramid together in 1978. We said Americans should be eating 11 servings of carbohydrates a day, and the average American in the next 20 years gained 20 pounds. I gained 40, so for some of you who didn't, I was making it up. So we would call this hypoglycemia. This is really the insulin trap, and the insulin trap has huge implications to it. And those huge implications are, American culture tells you you're a fat, lazy slob because you're sitting on the couch and you're eating too much. That's how you got to be overweight. That's actually exactly backwards. You gain weight because you ate the wrong food first, and the hormonal effects on you made you feel so crummy that you had to eat more calories because you felt like you were starving. So actually overeating was secondary. It was secondary, not primary. The primary defect was eating the wrong food and setting off the wrong hormonal signals. The secondary effect is then you eat a few calories to catch up because you slammed your fat cells shut and put them into storage mode, and they couldn't eat anything. That's the problem. So that's the insulin trap. Okay? So let's go over pop quiz on insulin. Insulin is your glucose controlling hormone or your storage hormone? All right, most of you are paying attention. Good. If you secrete insulin, your fat cells are slammed shut, meaning you are carrying around an energy supply you can't get to. That would be true, like a backpack. Humans used to need insulin for 6 months a year in Paleolithic times. False. We were designed to have calories, carbohydrates for 3 months a year. Okay? And now we have them for 12. So, you can actually look at our body and define it as almost like there are two economies. One of those economies is the glucose economy. And we can look at how many calories your body can store as glucose. And do you know you can store glucose in the form of something called glycogen? And you can store 1,500 calories in glycogen. And if you're a really superb athlete, you can boost up to about 1,800. The Olympic athletes can maybe get up to 1,800. But that requires a lot of training and your muscle takes up extra glucose. 1,800 calories is what you eat in one day. Each pound of fat is worth 3,500 calories. The average woman in America is 30% fat. And if she weighs 150 pounds, she's got 50 pounds of fat, which means she's got roughly 100 or maybe 200,000 calories. And there's some of us. I had one woman in my office lean over and put on 3 more zeros, and she says, I got about 200 million calories. But each of us, the average man in this room, the average 50-year-old man in America is 25% body fat. They weigh 200 pounds, they've got 50 pounds of fat. Those 50 pounds mean they've got 200,000 calories. The glucose economy has 1,500 calories. The fat economy has 200,000 in reserve. Which economy do you want to be running off of? Which economy do you want access to? So the glucose economy is activated in a carbohydrate-rich environment. And fundamentally, it's designed to store calories. But the problem is your body wants to protect your brain so you always have an even flow of energy to your brain. So to keep your brain happy, we can't transition back and forth very easily. The glucose economy is driven by insulin. 25% of the year it requires precise timing and allocation of calories to break even and not gain weight, because it's really an economy designed to store calories and gain weight. So we're all living in this world because we constantly eat some carbohydrates. So if we combine it with intense exercise and very careful and eat precisely 3 meals a day and one little tiny snack here and there, we might not gain weight. The problem is most of the time we fail, and so bit by bit we gradually gain weight over the years, and we don't feel so good and we feel awful when our glucose drops. The fat protein economy, well, your body doesn't like more than about 1.5 grams a day of protein per kilo. So when you think about that, you weigh 70 kilos, a woman weighs 70 kilos, her body wants about 100 grams of protein a day. Maybe, at max. 3 to 4 calories per gram, so she wants about 300 calories a day of protein. Well, if you're going to eat 300 calories a day of protein, and you're not meant to have any carbs, and you're allowed 1,800 calories a day, you're going to eat 1,500 calories of fat. And yet in America, remember last month we talked about how in America we've got a pickle up our rear thinking about how awful fat is. And yet, to run on the protein fat economy, we've got to talk about fat, and eating fat is a healthy thing. The problem is it takes about 10 days to transition from the glucose economy to the fat economy. And as we do that, we're ramping up something called ketone production and ketone utilization, and that's managed by the absence of insulin. But once you do that, you have smooth access to those calories. And when you have smooth access to those calories, your body goes through a very interesting transition because you're starting to run on ketones. And your ketones, you feel much, much different. So has anybody here ever gone on the Atkins diet and not felt too hungry when that happens? You don't feel too hungry? I have a woman today who says she's eating about 800 calories a day and she doesn't feel hungry at all. She's lost almost 50 pounds in the last 4 months. Unbelievable. She's so happy with me. She says, my clothes don't fit. She says, all my clothes are falling off of me. So you have smooth access to calories, you stop feeling hypoglycemia, and the rest of your body says, sure, we got ketones to spare. So you can do the following experiment. If I take 12 young men in college who are overweight and have an average blood sugar of 112, and I put them on a metabolic ward, and I give them 20 units of IV insulin, and I drive their blood sugar down to 50, you know how those men feel? How do you think they'd feel? Horrible. They're hypoglycemic, they're sweaty, they're nervous, they can't remember anything, they're confused and combative. And so the IRB said you had to give them sugar back again. You couldn't get them any lower than 50 because they wouldn't allow them to do the experiment. Now take those same 12 men and put them on a diet of nothing but 1.5 grams a day of protein and fat. Not one carbohydrate in them, and do it for 10 days. And when you're college kids and broke, you're willing to put up with that. Okay? Now, guess what their average insulin level is? Guess what their average glucose is? Used to be 112, now their average glucose is down to 75. Now give them insulin IV and drive their blood sugar down to 40. Guess what happens to them? Nothing. They feel fine. How are you? Here's their blood sugar down to nothing, but they're running on a ketone economy and their brain is getting all the ketones it needs. They're not running on sugar anymore. They stopped that hypoglycemic cycle. They stop feeling hungry. They've got ketones in them. They feel great. All right. So turns out the brain can run on ketones just fine. It's a standard teaching in medicine that you can't have ketones in your urine or in your blood. If you have ketones, that's very dangerous. That's only very dangerous if you're a diabetic on insulin and have ketoacidosis. That's when ketones are dangerous. So do you sell ketone sticks here?
No.
Oh, you need to. Because I'm telling people to buy ketone sticks. I told them you have them here. Okay. All right. Add that to your list, Dan. Because I tell everybody on a diet, get ketone sticks. When you're on a diet trying to lose weight, I only want you on the very first range of ketones. I don't want you on purple. I just want you in the pink. Gray is negative. In the very first line, ketones shows about 1 to 3 ketones per millimeter. That means your fat cells are open for business. You're excreting fat. And that means you are losing weight. And you've now transitioned into that ketone economy. And you check your ketones, and once you find out, by golly, if I eat a piece of pie, will my ketones go away? And the answer is yes. 2 hours later, you have no ketones for the next 8 hours. And it'll take you 3 or 4 days to get back into good ketones again. So stop eating pie. You thought it was a fruit pie. Yeah, right. I heard that line. So we have a sequence we go through. In our modern industrial society, we've all been on this ketone economy because we have carbs available to us year-round, and our glycogen storage capacity is about 1,500 calories. So now I eat an extra slice of bread, and my glucose economy is full. I'm at 1,500 calories. My glycogen stores are full. So I eat an extra slice of bread, and I got 100 extra calories of glucose sloshing around in my body. And what happens? 100 more calories, my muscle's full, my liver's full. So what happens to my blood sugar? It goes up a little bit, right? When my blood sugar goes up, insulin goes up. And what does insulin do to the rest of my body? What does it tell my body to do? Go into storage. But storage is here, and metabolism is here in my liver. So I've got to turn that glucose into fat to store here. But that fat isn't water soluble. Fat doesn't dissolve in water. So how do I dissolve that stuff in water? So insulin tells my liver, start making fat, and tells the fat cells to, okay, start importing energy, guys. And so I've got to make something to transport that fat from my liver to my fat cells. And I call that an LDL. I'm getting to cholesterol. Do you see where I'm getting here? Okay, you see it coming? So liver starts making fat molecules, and I've got to wrap those fat molecules in a membrane, and I put all sorts of cholesterol in here in the membrane to make it into a nice little fat bubble, and I put protein on the surface of it so it's water soluble, and then I can put this in your blood and it'll dissolve in your blood and travel through your blood to your fat cells, and then I got to put a docking thing on the top here, so just like a spaceship, it can plug into your cell, and then you can squirt all that fat into your fat cell. And I call that an LDL. And I say, your LDLs are too high, we better put you on a statin. And my answer is, no, your LDLs are too high, I got to take away your bread. Because that's what got the high LDL. Why am I putting you on a drug that causes all sorts of metabolic disruption when the primary cause was you ate a piece of bread? Are you getting the gist? The reason you have high blood fats has nothing to do with eating bacon. It has everything to do with eating bread or any other form of glucose that's readily available to you. The cause of high cholesterol, I will say that 12 times until you all throw me off the stage, is not eating fat. That's what we talked about last month. The cause of high cholesterol, again and again and again, pound this into your brain, is eating loosely available carbohydrates. That's the enemy. The problem is it gets worse. That makes it sound simple. The problem is as your fat cells get big, they become insulin resistant, which means to get those cells to respond, you have to have even higher insulin level, which means you have high insulin level all the time, which means you're in storage mode all day long, which means anything you eat goes into storage. So I give you any calories and it gets worse. So every new calorie goes to storage and you're in a vicious cycle. That's the vicious cycle. And if you feel you can't lose weight, well, you can't, unless you take this on like chemotherapy. And the best way to go chemotherapy is to say, I can't eat one carbohydrate. None. But you can eat fat. You can have fat. Fat makes you feel full and you go, ugh, can't eat anymore. Had enough. Have a tablespoon of olive oil. Didn't feel hungry. Have 4 eggs. I had 4 eggs for breakfast this morning. 4 soft-boiled eggs. How many calories in an egg? 60. So I had how many calories for breakfast? 240 calories. For lunch, I had a 25-gram protein shake. I've had 400 calories so far today. I haven't felt hungry today. I promise you when I get home I'm going to eat the refrigerator, but that's a separate issue. Okay, so pop quiz on economies. Glucose economy means you're in storage mode with carbs, insulin as a driving force. True. All right? The fat economy, your body switches to running on ketones broken down from fat molecules. True. It takes 10 days off carbs to switch from glucose to ketones. True. That's it. And in the glucose economy, if you eat 100 extra calories of carbs, you turn on the LDL so they can carry those extra calories as fat to your fat cells. Those 4 questions are the fundamental basis for why you get high blood cholesterol. All right? So how to live to be 100? 1992 study looking at centenarians. They have 3 things in common. They have low triglycerides, which means they don't eat any glucose. They have high LDLs, which means they eat a high-fat diet. And they have very low insulin, which means they have a low-carb, high-fat diet. You can look at 100-year-olds, and that's the diet they've been eating all their lives. They eat a high-fat, low-carb diet. And so they look like people. They look like this. She's a member of my church. She's not. Okay? But you look at 100-year-olds all around the world. They've also maintained their estrogen. They've maintained their progesterone. But they've never allowed themselves to eat a lot of carbohydrates because they live in a place where they just don't get them. They don't get those. So elevated insulin in your fat cells are like a bank vault. Elevated insulin slams those fat cells shut. So for those of you who are in the conundrum of how do I lose weight, I've just given you the key to it. So insulin, unfortunately, is associated with inflammation. So anytime you have elevated insulin, you're going to have elevated inflammation. And so once you're overweight and you're in this overloaded glucose economy and insulin is chronically elevated, then you're chronically inflamed. And you're chronically in pain, and you ache all over, and everything on you hurts. In the meantime, those fat cells, some fat cells get to a certain size, and they die. And now you have a dead fat cell filled with all this fat in the middle of all these other fat cells. So all white cells have to come and try to clean it up. And so fat tissue starts becoming an incredible factory of inflammatory cytokines. So we thought fat tissue was simply passive energy storage. We now realize that actually fat tissue is very dangerous inflammatory tissue. So it's like, this is important to get rid of this stuff. And the problem is insulin keeps those fat cells shut. All right? So how do you know if you're insulin resistant? Very simple. Stand up against a wall. What touches the wall first? Uh-oh. Darn it. Okay. If your tummy touches the wall first, I have a 38-inch waist size. That's the maximum waist size men should have. Okay, metabolic syndrome is defined in men as having a waist size over 38. My blood sugar is 101 chronically. My father is grossly diabetic. So I have the metabolism to tiptoe and become easily diabetic. But we look at this, and this is what we all have. Women who have a waist size over 35 inches, this might be the simplest interpretation of metabolic syndrome. But so the four horsemen of atherosclerosis are oxidation, inflammation, glycation, and stress. So what's glycation? Glycation is when your blood sugar is chronically a little bit elevated, it starts sticking to proteins where it shouldn't be. So it's basically basting you on the inside. It's like taking barbecue sauce and basting you on the inside.
That's oxidation?
That's glycation.
Thank you.
This is glycation. So glycation, and so the hemoglobin A1C, when I draw your blood, is measuring glucose stuck to the hemoglobin molecule. And so the hemoglobin A1C is a good measure, and Medicare pays healthcare systems extra money when they get people's hemoglobin A1C below 6. I say you're not really healthy until I get it below 5.5. My slender athletic patients get down to as level as 4.1. So 4.1 is about the best you'll ever be. 5 is pretty darn good. 5.5 is my target. Medicare says 6 is okay. My 89-year-old diabetic father is at 12. So that's kind of the range. So that's glycation. Glycation is sugar sticking to proteins in the wrong places. You can measure hemoglobin A1C because I can draw blood from you. But if it's sticking to my hemoglobin, it's sticking to my eyeballs, into my blood vessels, into my brain, into my tendons, into my joints. So glycation all over the body is causing damage because it's like if I would stick an orange on your jaw, you'd look a little funny, but you could still eat. But if I get another orange under your armpit, now you got to walk around like this. And if I stick one between your legs, now you got to walk really funny. And somewhere along the line, sticking oranges onto you is going to make it so you can't function. Sticking glucose onto proteins makes them so they eventually can't function. So they stop working properly. So that's glycation. And that's the easiest way to measure it. And the question is, how did we stop? How come we've accused fat for the last 50 years and we didn't get hold of sugar? What happened? What was the intellectual miss that we made back in the 1960s and 70s? And the interesting thing is it's a fascinating story. It's going to be a Robert Ludlum novel someday. But it's dark intrigue inside the hallways of government. Because it turns out there were many voices saying back in the 60s saying, look at sugar, it's not fat, it's sugar. And you know what happened? They got squelched. Well, part of the problem was Adkins was out there doing it, and Adkins was proposing a low-carb diet, and he was such a jerk, he made people so angry that nobody paid attention to him. Now, customers liked him. Consumers read his books in droves, and many, many people lost weight, but he couldn't convince the medical community because he was sort of a pompous jerk. But Judkins was an absolute angel, and he was in England writing books on it. I wish I had bought one of his books because they now sell for like $15,000 because he turned out to be exactly right. The problem is there was a huge vested interest campaign of advertising and the sugar lobby that put money all over Congress and lobbied heavily with congressional members to change their votes and offered them money, and it was all hidden behind the scenes. And so sugar completely disappeared in the 1960s. And they pulled it off for 30 years. They did a better job than the tobacco industry. Do you know that U.S. Sugar just recently sold 100,000 acres of farmland and is getting out of the sugar business in America? Because in fact, we Americans are eating less and less and less sugar. People like you are beginning to catch on to it. But the sugar lobby was intensely active, as was the pharmaceutical industry, because the pharmaceutical industry makes money when you take statins. Do you know how much money a year goes into the statin industry in America? $30 billion a year go into statins. And at least one of those billions goes directly to me in my pocket. No, I wish. No, $1 billion goes paid to doctors, to speakers' fees, to research, to all sorts of corrupted things. There's all sorts of laboratories run all around America. So, you know, if your laboratory is run by a statin company that's giving you $20 million, guess what your feelings about statins end up being? There's a huge amount of money of that $30 billion that gets kicked back to hospitals to design quality assurance systems, that goes back to healthcare system, that goes back to doctors and research labs, all so they can keep going. So the problem is that fructose and sugar is even more dangerous than glucose, because fundamentally fructose is 7 times more potent at glycating proteins than glucose. So you know where the number one source of fructose comes in America? Where's the number one source of fructose? Corn, but where does it come in your diet? The calories we drink. So people who willingly drink sugared soda of any kind. I had a woman day for yesterday, or last week, cheerfully tell me she had got her son completely off of sugared soda. He was only drinking 7-Up. Oh. Okay? She thought soda was brown stuff, and 7-Up was okay. So we had a discussion. But how many of you drink orange juice? I promise you, orange juice is equivalent to sugared Coca-Cola. If you, the icon of American food, breakfast, orange juice for breakfast, it's a sugared drink that delivers glucose to you. In fact, we can follow the metabolic story. When you drink a glass of orange juice, you turn the fructose into LDLs faster than almost anything else. You should think of orange juice as a high blood fat food. It instantly turns you into having blood fats. If you like oranges, please eat the whole orange. And instead of having 5 oranges in terms of orange juice, have 1 full orange, and then you get the fiber. And the fiber will help push that fructose down into your colon.
What about if you juice the orange?
Pardon?
What about if you juice your own oranges?
Oh, bless your heart. You think, I'm sorry? No, no different.
No?
It's just as wicked. Yeah. If you'd like, there's a university lecture from the University of San Francisco in California by the name of Lustig, L-U-S-T-I-G, who has a 1-hour lecture on YouTube called Bittersweet. And if you look up Lustig's lecture on bittersweet, he goes through the precise metabolic sequence and the literature that supports why beer, orange juice, and white bread and how they're different from each other. At the end of the day, he'd rather have you eating the white bread than the beer or the orange juice, because orange juice and the fructose it delivers to your body is just as wicked. And actually, oranges are wonderful food. When you're on a ketone economy, you should have an occasional orange. But isn't fat bad for you? So let's get down to how can we get down to our fundamental problems here. First of all, let's talk saturated fat. It's been widely demonized. We've been told to eat vegetable oil instead of fat because saturated fat is otherwise known as bacon, lard, butter. Okay, butter or bacon, right? So we've widely demonized that. We said saturated fat's horrible for you. What we've now learned, I'm going to go through literature for you. Saturated fat actually raises your HDLs and it changes your LDLs into puffy large ones, which are the safe ones. You know, so bacon and saturated fat turns out to be just fine for you. Let's look at the literature. For example, a meta-analysis is when you take all the big studies that are well designed and combine them into one and use statistical methods to combine all their studies. So let's talk about Patty. It published in the most prestigious journal in America for nutrition, the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, 2 years ago. Patty Siritarino said, let's look at saturated fat and risk of heart disease and stroke. And what she found, she got 21 studies were included. They looked at 347,000 people, followed for up to 23 years. Conclusion. Prospective epidemiological studies shows there is no significant evidence for concluding that dietary saturated fat is associated with the risk of coronary heart disease or stroke. There is no evidence that butter or bacon is bad for you. That's exactly opposite what your doctor would tell you today if you went to his office or her office. All right? So, no connection. Another meta-analysis from the Netherlands Journal of Medicine. Saturated fat has no effect on heart disease. Carbohydrates do have an effect. Omega fats reduce heart disease, and omega-6 fats increase it. Omega-3 fats is known as fish oil. Omega-6 fats are known as corn oil, soybean oil, vegetable oil, basically every vegetable oil in the store besides. So vegetable oils, as a general rule, are problematic. So we don't want to eat any vegetable oils besides olive oil. And eating high glycemic carbs makes for more blood fats. That's the same thing Lustig says on the YouTube, Better Sweet. That eating high carbohydrates gets you in trouble. So it's the carbs that are the problem. That was published 2 years ago. So does cholesterol predict heart disease? Does cholesterol predict heart disease? The answer is no. Meta-analysis from Japan, 150,000 people followed for 5 years, pooling 5 studies, compared cholesterol. Below 160, the American Heart Association says below 160 is healthy. 160 to 199 is okay. 200 to 240 is, ooh, a little bit of a problem. And anything over 240 is deadly serious. That's American Heart Association criteria for cholesterol, right? Meta-analysis looking at 150,000 people, following them for how long do they live. Guess who lived the longest? Guess who died the fastest? Your cholesterol doesn't matter unless you have a very rare cholesterol disease where you have 400 or 500. All right? So did you get that? American Heart Association stopped putting cholesterol in any table or metric for treatment guidelines. The Japanese Heart Association. The Japanese Heart Association took it out of their guidelines. So the Harvard Professional Health Study came out 4 years ago. Anybody ever heard about the Harvard Professional Health Study? Oh, good. So I can ask you. They say there are 5 things that can reduce your risk of heart disease 92%. What would those 5 things be?
Stop smoking.
Stop smoking.
Exercise.
Exercise every day.
Stop eating sugar.
Nope. Well, no, actually that was in there. They said eat well, eat healthy, and their healthy diet was no sugar, very few white carbohydrates, sort of a Mediterranean diet. Lots of vegetables, plenty of olive oil, a little bit of white meat, no trans fats. That was roughly a Mediterranean diet. So eating healthy, so far so good.
Lower stress.
Get your body weight, they didn't have that down. Get your body weight down below BMI of 25. And number 5 was a glass of wine a day. God bless them. Okay? So did you notice that? No, did anybody hear cholesterol on that list?
No.
Right. No cholesterol even mentioned on that list. So our largest public health study in America has been coming out. Our largest studies have been coming out of the Harvard School of Public Health, and their Harvard Professional Health Study, about 5 years ago now, showed there is no metric for which cholesterol matters. So let's keep going. I got some more wonderful stories. Anybody here ever have a problem with memory with their statin?
Yeah.
I've had multiple patients who told me they've had issues with memory. Anybody here feel really good about your memory?
No.
Anybody, as we get older, we're all anxious about it, right? And so to take a poison that makes your memory worse, that's just insanity. Immune dysfunction, muscle aches and pains. Probably 20% of people on a statin will have muscle aches and pains, and you tell your doctor, and I promise you, your doctor, you can ask your doctor, have you ever reported muscle aches and pains to the pharmacist? They never have, because it's just so routine, so many people have it. We just sort of say, well, that's just some of the side effects, maybe we should lower the dose a little. But nobody ever reports it. Massively underreported. Studies show that virtually no reporting, and besides, when you call the drug company doesn't save the data. There have been multiple studies showing that drug companies don't save adverse side effect data. They have no vested interest in taking their drug that they put $1 billion into and showing its side effects that it doesn't work. Sexual dysfunction. There's dramatic lowering of testosterone in both men and women, and as a consequence, men have a high complication rate of things like ED, and women have simply no sexual interest. So Dr. Logerel, the doctor who actually ran the Lyon heart study in France, wrote a book called A Near Perfect Sexual Crime, Statins versus Cholesterol. Of course, maybe those French are more interested in, oh well, okay. We won't go there. In the meantime, there is clearly an increase in death from congestive heart failure for folks on statins. And there's clearly an increase in diabetes on a variety of different statins, which the net effect is, okay, let's do the pop quiz. Statins improve your memory. False. Many reports to the worst. Muscle aches and pains are rare and unusual. False. Dramatically underreported. Number one reason for people stopping taking them. They increase your risk of diabetes. True. They lower testosterone, increase sexual dysfunction in men, a near perfect sexual crime. True. So the benefits. Let's just talk about some of the benefits. And I'm going to show you how the data gets manipulated so doctors believe it. The ALLHAT study, largest cholesterol study ever conducted with using pravastatin. 100,000 or 10,000 folks with high LDLs, heart attacks waiting to happen, no difference in treated versus placebo. Drug did lower the cholesterol, but no difference in mortality. Not one iota. It lowered cholesterol, but no change in mortality. Okay, Ascot trial. 10,000 people with high blood pressure, at least 3 other risk factors. In other words, heart attacks waiting to happen. After 1 year, Lipitor was winning dramatically after 1 year. Guess what happened after 3 years? No change. Not one side effect change. So for those of you who want to take Lipitor, you can do it for a year. It seems to have an impact for about a year, and after that, you're done. But here's what the data looks like. Number of events. Notice the data that doctors see. Number of events. Heart attacks, chest pain, seeing a doctor, going to an emergency room, things like that. Can be shown to be decreased after a couple years, but mortality doesn't make a difference. So do statins have a benefit? Yes. The heart protection study from Zocor shows you have an 87% chance of living 5 years, or a placebo group has an 80, so there's a 1.8 chance difference in 5 years. All right? That was the heart protection study. So you have 1.8% chance. A lower rate was independent of, unfortunately, the lower rate was independent of how much you lowered your cholesterol. So it didn't seem to have an impact of lowering cholesterol. That's interesting. The Japanese lipid intervention study, 47,000 patients Zocor for 6 years. After 5 years, cross-referencing deaths and LDL levels, findings, no connection between death and lowering cholesterol levels. No connection. Just no connection. The Prosper study, 2 groups, no prior heart disease and prior heart disease. Half of each group got pravastatin, and there seemed to be some help in those who had prior heart disease, but not a single life saved. Both groups receiving Pravachol got more cancer. Did your doctor ever tell you that? I'm going to put you on Pravachol so you can get cancer? You know, I don't mean to be cynical, but that just strikes me as being something we should be talking about. And so you look at the data, and again, the data looks like that. The Jupiter trial. The Jupiter trial was the justification to give everybody statins. We were going to give every woman in America statins because I can take my market of men who've had a heart attack between ages 40 and 64, and I want to expand that. I want to add it to all men and all women. So the Jupiter study got designed. 118,000 patients with normal or low cholesterol but high C-reactive protein. The headline was, Crestor lowers heart attack risk 50%. That's what they said. Crestor, that's how it got publicized. All right, the math. The placebo group had a 1.8% risk of a heart attack. The Crestor group had a 0.9% risk. So the reduction was 0.9% absolute risk reduction, not 50% risk reduction. So it's a relative risk reduction. Conclusion, you have to treat 120 people for 1.9 years at a cost of $250,000 to prevent 1 heart attack. Now, a heart attack has 14% mortality, so you have to prevent 7 heart attacks to prevent 1 death. So you've got to spend roughly $1.75 million to save 1 life. That's just about the most expensive intervention we have in healthcare. So all that money goes to the pharmaceutical industry and out of your pocket and out of your children's pocket and your grandchildren's education fund and etc. You get the gist. Oh, by the way, more Crestor patients got diabetes. Didn't get to that. So the therapeutics initiative is basically the Canadians got sick to death of our studies. And they said, we're going to find a group of doctors and statisticians who have absolutely no ties to the pharmaceutical industry. No ties whatsoever. So that nobody can be polluted. Nobody's lab can be sponsored. And what they found was at the University of British Columbia. And they basically took no outside money and they said, what is the benefits of statins for primary prevention? And primary prevention means you've never had a heart attack before, and we're going to make sure you don't by giving you a statin. Because your cholesterol was 240, so I'm going to give you a statin to lower it. And what did they find? Meta-analysis of all the big statin studies, 1.4 risk reduction over 3 to 5 years, or 71 people have to take a drug for 3 to 5 years to prevent one heart attack. With all the side effects and toxicity, they said, it's not worth it. Total mortality is not reduced. So total mortality is not reduced. It does reduce a heart attack or two. So you do reduce a heart attack, but you don't reduce, you get a little more cancer. So you have a little less heart disease, a little more cancer, a little more diabetes, a little more memory loss, maybe an extra car accident. Because your memory loss, you didn't remember there's a stoplight at that corner, or whatever. So John Abraham said in Harvard, also did his own analysis at Harvard, and he just did it by himself. His conclusion, statins, after review of all the literature, never for any women, ever. Okay? Never. Just simple. Don't. All right? Not for men over age 70. Never. All right? High-risk men aged 30 to 69 should be advised that 50 of them need to be treated for 5 years to prevent one event, and for 35 years to prevent one death. 50 men, 35 years to prevent one death. Okay? That's an informed consent.
When was that study done?
That was his conclusion of all the literature, of publishing all the literature. Right.
Did he do that recently?
Pardon? He actually published a book called Overdosed America. If you want to read the book, his book is called Overdosed America, and he talks about a bunch of other drugs too, and equally critical an eye. Overdosed America by John Abramson. It's a wonderful book. It's quite inexpensive because it's in paperback now, and he wants it widely distributed. You can get it easily. So pop quiz on statins. Mortality reduction for heart attack matches increases from other causes in most studies. True or false? Mortality reduction for heart attack matches increases of other causes in most studies. And the answer is true. Generally, no lives are saved. All right? Our most objective review, the Therapeutics Initiative out of Canada, found significant benefits from statins. False. This lecture must be too long. Okay. The Therapeutics Initiative found that 71 people have to take statins for 5 years to prevent one heart attack. True. That's it in a nutshell. And John Abraham's analysis, high-risk men aged 30 to 69 should be advised that 50 men have to take the drug for 5 years to prevent one heart attack. That's proper informed consent. In the meantime, you have to tell them that they're going to not be able to have sexual function. They'll have pain in their legs and muscles. They have trouble remembering anything. And so you have to, if you really want to do informed consent, you have to tell them about all the signs, and they have a higher risk of getting diabetes. So what's the stress connection? I think we need to start talking about the other causes of diabetes, about the heart disease. We talked about inflammation and omega fats. We talked about oxidation and glycation last month. But we also need to talk about stress. I think being president of the United States, you notice how all these guys who get to be president instantly get white hair? This is and I don't think it's because they're age 40 to 59. They all, every president going in starts out with dark hair and comes up with white hair. I want a woman to get elected and see if it happens to her too. Or would she dye her hair and fool us? Okay. The stress connection, we're beginning to learn how to measure stress and the impact it has on you. And we're beginning to realize that stress is really deadly serious. And now we're beginning to be able to measure things like, for those who've ever done heart math kind of stuff and breathing exercise, you can actually show that the rate at which your heart has variability, heart rate variability with breathing predicts your stress level. And you can actually manipulate it by lowering your stress level with breathing exercises. But I think we need to start making intentional things. You know, this Practicing forgiveness, for example. You know that person who really just pissed you off, and they're just like a stone in your shoe. And you spend all your life worrying about them and angry at them and planning revenge and thinking about how you're going to screw them the next time. We just need to get over it. It's not worth the stress on you because you're the one that's really suffering by that inability to let go of that. Okay, you were harmed. I'll give it to you. You were harmed. I feel sorry for you. Forgive him and get over it. Get on it. If Jesus could do it on the cross, what a good example. Learn to breathe deeply daily. Learn to meditate. For those of you who have a religious tradition, regular, reliable prayer is a wonderful thing to do. For those who don't have a religious tradition, learn to do breathing exercises or some sort of meditation. But make that a regular... Find somebody you can laugh with. You need to be able to tell a joke until tears run down your cheek. Okay? So, here's my joke for you. I just had a friend come back from Alaska. I said, you know my Alaska joke? He says, oh no, what is it? He says, you hear about the police officer that retired to Alaska? This is a slightly off-color joke, but it's okay. And he said, oh, no. He said, well, he had been a police officer for 40 years in Chicago, and he didn't want to ever see another human being again. He couldn't stand what human beings did to each other. So he bought 40 acres way back Alaska, and he got up there and he got his winter supplies. He hadn't seen anybody for 4 months. It was wonderful. But then a blizzard came up, and it was getting winter, and he thought, oh, 6 months to go before I see anybody again. And just in the middle of the blizzard, bang, bang, bang on his door, and there's this great big man out there, big hairy guy. Smelled awful. I want to invite you to my Christmas party. Oh, how nice. He says, I live about 20 miles down the road here. I'm your nearest neighbor. Well, good, how nice of you. Do you mind if there's a little bit of cussing at the Christmas party? Oh, no, I'm a police officer, no problem. You know, we're a little rough here in Alaska. Do you mind if there's a little bit of fighting? Oh, no. I'm a police officer. I've seen fighting all my life. He says, do you feel bad about shallow vacuous sex? He says, well, I've been 3 months and we haven't had much. But he says, well, good. He says, does it matter what I wear? Does it matter what I wear to the party? Oh, no, it's just going to be the two of us. Okay, see? You need to learn to laugh until tears run down your cheek. You need to find somebody that can make you laugh. The best stress relief in the world is humor and laughter. Or the other joke my wife told me about, when the pastor sat in church one day and said to the little kids, it was Easter time, and said to the little kids up front, do you know what the resurrection is? And the little boy says, yes, I know what the resurrection is. If it lasts 4 hours, you got to call your doctor. Okay. Doesn't it feel good to laugh? But we also need to learn how to sleep 8 hours. And we got to learn to stay in bed and get good, restful, restorative sleep. We've got to learn to belong to some people that love us. We've got to join clubs where people know your name and are happy to see you there. And aren't mad at you when you bridge 2 clubs and go down 3. Or whatever. I belong to a bridge club and I did horribly. They still love me. My bridge ladies like me. But you need to learn to care for people. It turns out wonderful stress reduction is when you become a caring person and give to somebody else. That's the core of every religious faith tradition. And because it's not just good for the person you're caring for, because it's caring for you. These things reduce stress. I sound like a clergywoman here, or a clergy person here. So what are things you should test? I think if you test cholesterol, the only thing you need to test is the size of the particles and how many there are, because there's patterns, and those patterns are telling you indirectly how sensitive you are to glucose. That's really what the cholesterol test is all about. If you have a whole bunch of particles, it means you're eating way too much glucose. Your total cholesterol HDL ratio is probably also pretty effective. And if it's below 4.5, that's pretty good. If it's 2, it's much better. And if it's 1.1, God bless you, that's really great. You should measure your inflammation. Fibrinogen is a way of measuring inflammation. You should measure your ferritin. It turns out that ferritin might be more dangerous than cholesterol for there's been some discussion, though last week I saw a wonderful article from Spain showing may not be the case. Lp(a) shows your risk for your genetic risk for heart disease. Homocysteine is a way of saying how well does your body, how sticky are your platelets. It's also again a 25% increase and we can lower homocysteine with B12 and folate. IL-6 is an inflammatory cytokine. Let's give me insight into how much vegetable oil you're really sneaking in. You can get a cardiac calcium scan. Anybody here gotten a cardiac calcium scan? $99 at Waukesha Hospital. All you need is $99. You can walk into Waukesha Hospital without a prescription, and they'll tell you how much calcium's in your coronary arteries. And if you want to know how to get rid of that calcium, come see me, because I'll show you how to do it. You don't need to have an angioplasty. Angioplasty won't help you anything. Getting rid of it will help you. You can also do the Predix test. In my practice, I'm doing the Predix test on folks, and the nice thing about the Predix company is they allow you to get that test whenever you want, because every insurance company in America pays for it. And the Predix test combines a fasting insulin, a hemoglobin A1C, a glucose, a ferritin, an IL-2, an adiponectin, a C-reactive protein. And you can get this every month. And so when you do lifestyle changes and try a diet or try exercising or try eating differently or taking fish oil, you can get it again and see if it made a difference. And you can keep getting it as often as you want. It's not quite free. I charge you $15 for the poking a finger and sending it off. So what will work for me? A diet. We've got to quit sugar, wheat and soda and processed carbs and trans fats and processed meats and excess vegetable oils. Whatever it takes to get your insulin level below 5. That's what I'm using my Predix test for. I'm testing folks and I say, my goal is to get your insulin level below 5. And I want you to eat more salmon and fish and berries and cherries and grass-raised red meat and vegetables and nuts and olive oil and garlic and turmeric and dark chocolate and pomegranate juice and green tea and red wine. I don't want to forget that red wine, 1 glass a day. I want you to lose weight until your BMI is below 25, whatever it takes to help you lose weight. I want you to exercise every day, at least 30 minutes of walking. And hopefully nobody here smokes. I want you to sleep at least 7 hours a night. I want you to practice stress reduction. I want you to meditate and slow down. Let your life become a little less complicated. Learn to laugh. Get a library of 10 really good jokes you can tell your girlfriend or boyfriend and just have a good laugh over. Play. Learn to play. Learn to be playful. Remember when you were at 10 years old and you went over to your best friend's house and just the whole day just passed so quickly? Find a way of developing that playfulness again. That's wonderful stress reduction. Develop your friends, take care of your friends, love your friends dearly. And then here's the list of what you could do in terms of supplements. And this is basically empty the stores and the shelves in the store, because that's what this store does. MD Custom has all these things here. You need to be on at least a gram a day of DHA and EPA. Mixed tocopherols. I don't want you on vitamin E. I want you on mixed tocopherols and trienols, because that's what really lowers your. You could talk to Dan about that. Ribose is a wonderful tonic for cardiac, for hearts beating better, as is folks on acetylcarnitine have a 36% increased survival of heart attacks. You should all be on magnesium. Everybody in this room should be on magnesium every day. Everybody in this room should be on vitamin K2 every day. CoQ10, over age 50, you don't make it anymore. We should all be taking CoQ10. And Dan has everything on these shelves. You can get this list from him. I'm sure he can tell you. Some other supplements that help: B5, vitamin, curcumin, resveratrol, vitamin D. I'll leave this up if you want to look at this, because you can see these other things too. These are supplements that all help reduce coronary disease. So that's my talk. Now I'll take questions. Questions? Yes?
Q10 for women too?
Pardon?
Q10 for women too?
Oh, yes. Sure. You've got mitochondria just like the rest of us, just like men. The other 50% of us. Right.
And you believe in that ubiquinol form as opposed to the ubiquinone?
Pardon?
The ubiquinol form of the CoQ10?
Oh, yes. If you get to be a CoQ10 snob, you can be really, yeah. Yeah, the ubiquinol is probably a little bit better.
But not a big deal.
How much money do you want to pay?
Much more expensive.
I'm just totally amazed. If you read the magazine Life Extension, I'm totally amazed how completely vulnerable I am to buying the most expensive product on the market, because after their articles, they make me believe that whatever I'm taking is worthless, and whatever they're selling is the best around. But and actually CoQ10 might be one of the places where that is a good argument. So the ubiquinol might be better, but I'd rather you just at least take some. No, the CoQ10 is the one place where, in fact, you might be a little better. Yes?
What about the high-fat breast cancer connection?
Oh, the question about what heart disease, breast cancer. There is a slight, the high-fat breast disease, breast cancer connection. There is a slight connection, but that's on the order of a couple percent. It's not on the course of decimal points. And so there is a connection there. I think that mostly comes from the effect on estrogens, and there's a whole different universe of how you reduce breast cancer risk that focuses on your metabolism of estrogens, and that's just a whole different topic. I think the fat connection with breast cancer is don't know what to do with it, because it's one of those side effects that I don't know how to fit it into a cohesive argument in a whole. What I do know is the following data. Anorectic women have 70% less breast cancer. The less fat in your body, the less breast cancer you have. So being slender is most important of all. If it takes, whatever it takes to get you to lose weight is the most important thing. So my hunch is the saturated fat is a red herring, because really eating fat helps you lose weight. And if I can get you to lose weight, then I can actually get your risk reduction, your more reduction.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
That's my hunch.
Body fat.
Yes.
So what about the issue of animal products having growth hormones?
Oh, now that's another whole ball of wax. But I don't. How many hours have you got? I think there's probably huge implication of that we don't know how to measure yet, and that's exactly one of those things that's kind of below the radar, but it's sort of perversely and universally there. The question is, what about animal products and growth hormones?
And cancer.
I personally don't buy cow milk. I drink coconut milk. Personally, because I'm just going. I don't drink because I don't want the RGBH.
Right, but isn't this argument that go for it with the meat?
No, I didn't say meat. I said fat.
Well, okay. Well,
You heard meat.
Okay, so but then if you don't want meat products,
I'm living in America. It's sort of hard to get away from some of that stuff. I personally go to the farmer's market and buy grass-raised beef. I personally go and I buy omega fatty acid containing eggs. I spend more money on my, I don't buy standard eggs anymore. I buy omega fatty acid containing eggs. I'm trying not to say brand names.
yeah. So would it be possible to do this and be vegetarian?
Would it be possible to do this and be vegetarian? Sure. The problem is it's a little hard to be vegetarian eating and get sufficient calories and avoid carbs.
Yep.
So because that basically we come down to a raw food diet, which eating just greens, and then you get on an alkaline diet, and once you're on an alkaline diet, you lose weight like a rock. But if you can alkalinize yourself eating nothing, but it's a little hard to get enough. The human brain consumes so many calories that it's kind of hard to do that eating a green diet. And then we end up going back. So many vegetarians end up being carboholics. And so I'd rather you eat meat and greens than have carbs. Yes?
Two questions. On your little quiz, you said numbers 4 through 7 were the fundamental basics for why you get high cholesterol. Okay.
Right.
And then the other question, because we've been so indoctrinated against the high fat, and for some of us, we thought of eating bacon is like, oh my gosh. So you try to ease into it with like your low-fat turkey bacon.
Sure.
Is that
Low-fat turkey bacon?
Yeah.
Well, what's in it?
We put fat.
It's turkey meat.
Yeah. but
It's just protein then.
So
I don't think they have very many carbs in it, but I think it's mostly meat. It's mostly protein.
until we bridge that gap to the real
Right.
thing.
And see, what happens is when you eat fat is your brain says, I've had enough food to eat. And you get ketones in your body, and your brain runs on ketones and says, I'm fine. My mother, here's an example. My mother is 88 years old, and she has a few cognitive issues, but she's probably about 30 pounds overweight. She weighed about 160, and she's only 5 feet 2 inches tall. So she needed to lose a couple pounds. But I said, I was worried about her cognitive issues, and I wanted to put her on the ketogenic diet. And I said, Mom, all I want you to eat is 1 tablespoon of coconut oil, breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
All day, that's it?
No, then she could eat then she could eat a regular food. Just eat a regular food. So she just added 1 tablespoon of coconut oil.
Yes.
The extra fat made her feel so full she didn't eat any snacks. She stopped eating a lot of other food, and she's now lost about 25 pounds. She's lost 25 pounds by just adding coconut oil to her diet.
Over what time frame?
It's been about 6 months.
6 months, that's pretty good.
That's pretty good. Now, here's coconut oil. Saturated fat is 18 carbons long. So what's in your stomach here and on your butt is 18 carbon saturated molecules, okay? Yeah, there's coconut oil right there on the shelf. Thank you, Dan. Saturated fat is a molecule 18 carbons long, and your body has a bunch of enzymes that recognize 18 carbons. We know that. We know how to store it and process it and attach it onto triglycerol. We can do 18 carbons. And if we're starving, we'll cut that 18 carbons into 2 carbon pieces that are called ketones. So if we're starving. But coconut oil is only 10 to 12 carbons long, maybe up to 14. Okay? No enzymes that recognize it. So when you eat coconut oil, your body can only do one thing, and that's go chop, 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 and make it into 5 ketones. So you got 5 ketone bodies, which then gets your body and your brain used to drawing on ketones so you feel full. The whole goal is for you to feel full. So eat a tablespoon of coconut oil, and you're forcing your brain, helping your brain to get used to ketones. So now you're running on ketones, and your insulin level gets lower and lower and lower, and your fat cells open up. Now, I've been looking through old pictures of mine from high school. I grew up in India, in a high school in India, and every one of my pictures in India looks like this, because we used to grease our hair with coconut oil, and it ran down my ears, and I couldn't keep my glasses up. Back in the days when I had hair that I could grease. So, but it's just hilarious seeing those pictures, because all my glasses are like this, because I couldn't keep my glasses up. So, yes, question.
If you're on statins, which I am now, should I just like stop suddenly, or do you have to taper yourself off, or how does, or change your diet and then wait like a few months, go have another cholesterol?
If you want to blow your doctor's mind, go on a 0 carb diet for 1 month, right before you get your cholesterol checked, and your doctor will say, "Oh my God, what'd you do?" I lowered my cholesterol 50 points in 1 month last year by being on a 0 carb diet. 50 points in 1 month. If you have if you want to do that, you lower your the question is then we thought people with the highest cholesterol live the longest. You can make that argument, but you can lower your cholesterol levels so dramatically. The cause of high cholesterol is your body's unwillingness to process carbs. It doesn't know what to do with them. You're only meant to eat carbs 2 months a year. 10 months a year, you're meant to be eating fat and protein and green vegetables. So eat green vegetables and all the fat and all the protein you want. So make a salad, and on your salad, no croutons. But put on 3 heaping tablespoons of the most delicious olive oil you can find. Go to the oilery and buy the really good expensive stuff. Put on 3 squirts of really expensive balsamic vinegar so it tastes divine. Put a couple eggs on top of it. Slice up a ham and some chicken. Put some blue cheese on it. You've got a 90% fat dish. You thought it was a salad. It is, it's a salad, but it's a high-fat, healthy salad. How many women do you know are actually living on salad? The problem is they're getting all these jars of salad dressing from the grocery store that are made out of vegetable oil. So they're eating poison. So make your own vegetable oil out of delicious olive oil. And on the side, add a tablespoon of coconut oil on top.
What about fruit? Is there
Fruit? What time of years do fruit ripen? Pears ripen in October. What are they designed as? They are carbohydrate foods. Nature designed them to ripen in October, and we were designed to eat them to make it through winter. They are carbohydrate-containing little bombs. They are wonderful nutrition for you once your insulin level is below 5 and your BMI is below 25. I want you to have pears. I want you to have apples. I want you to eat carbohydrates and cherries and fruits and nuts, all those things, once your BMI is below 25. But until your BMI is below 25, your heart disease risk is real. So it's losing, this is like saying you have breast cancer, we need to treat you and get rid of this cancer until it's better. The cholesterol is an indication that you have a metabolic disease called inability to handle carbohydrates. And you have to lose weight, and until you lose weight, your cholesterol is going to be there. And it's just a marker that you haven't lowered your intake of carbohydrates enough. Okay?
How can you increase your HDLs?
Pardon?
How can you increase your HDLs?
How can you increase, how can you increase your HDLs? Okay, the 30-second topic on this. I have spent 30 years telling people to increase their HDLs by taking niacin and exercising. And when I took niacin till my face flushed like your t-shirt, I got my HDLs from 38 all the way up to 41. Bruce Westman from Duke University, who has come up with the new Adkins, he's the author of the book, The New Adkins for a New You, only measures one thing on people on the Adkins diet, on his diet, their HDLs. And he says, as long as they're on the low-carb diet, their HDLs keep rising. He says, I get people to an HDL of 100 after 6 months. So if you want to increase your HDL, cut carbohydrates out with a fanatic passion and watch your HDL shoot through the roof. And then look me in the eye and tell me that a high-fat protein diet's bad for you. Because I can get you an HDL of 100 if you give me 6 months of Atkins. That's how you increase your HDLs. So simple as that. So the 30 years turned out that I turned out to be telling turned out to all be horse cookies. Those 30 years was completely wasted. Everything I told people those 30 years was worthless. It's no good to take niacin, and the exercise will not raise your HDLs.
No, I ran marathons and it didn't.
Doesn't do you any good. But if you want to raise your HDLs, get rid of that donut. And that pierogi or whatever it is that we eat in Wisconsin with such enthusiasm.
What about red rice yeast?
Red rice yeast is a statin. In fact, that's where the statins got discovered. That's Lipitor. Red rice yeast is Lipitor. Why are you taking it?
Well, just because it wasn't a pharmaceutical.
Right. It's a statin. Actually, I prescribe statins in a very, very tiny low dose to some patients, because for folks who have a high calcium load on their coronary arteries, testosterone, statins, Pepsid, and pentoxiflin are the 4 drugs that have been shown to modulate the toll receptor proteins in the wall of your arteries the most dramatically and help you reverse coronary artery disease. But you don't need a cholesterol-lowering dose. You need an anti-inflammatory dose. So my summary thought of the statins actually work because they're anti-inflammatory drugs, but they work at a very low level. The pharmaceutical industry isn't going to make any money selling you 5 milligrams when they want to sell you 80 milligrams. They want to sell you the 80 milligrams. The 5 milligrams is all you needed. I think we discovered statins because we had this little tiny benefit. And in fact, it was real. It's just measurable. It's just enough to do statistical studies. The problem is we looked at the cholesterol lowering effect, and that's the red herring. That's not what's really helping. What's helping is the anti-inflammatory effect. So red yeast rice in a tiny dose is a kind of a weak form of statin. Perfect. You're getting a nice, slow, low anti-inflammatory drug, and you're not worrying about your cholesterol. So do me a favor, don't measure your cholesterol, have the red yeast rice, and you're probably getting a slight benefit, and that's probably okay.
What about like the difference between all the different statins with brand names and so forth? Is there any one that's particularly worse than another?
When I'm in the barnyard, I can't tell what that stuff on the floor is, which horse it came from. Yes.
If it's an anti-inflammatory, why do you have pain in your joints?
Because you're taking a toxic dose that's way too much, and if you have pain in your joints, you have absolutely no reason to be taking it. Stop. The problem is what I talked about last month, is there are massive kickbacks from pharmaceutical industries to hospitals to raise their compliance rates of giving statins. So healthcare systems, just go to Aurora Healthcare Pharmacy and say, do you guys have any incentives to getting more people on statins? And look the guy straight in the eye as he answers you. And the answer would be, yes, sir, or yes, ma'am. There are massive kickbacks, and every doctor in every healthcare system, my salary when I worked in my large healthcare system had a $10,000 component of it that was dependent on quality measures. And one of those quality measures, I was in the emergency department, but the primary care doctors had to do statins, and part of my money depended on how well the primary care doctors did. So not only did I have personal pressure, but there was peer pressure that we all do this together. There's huge pressure on doctors. It's all filthy, dirty conflict of interest. I think, I sincerely, completely believe that 10 years from now that statins will have just disappeared. Once all the patents run out, it was like, we can't make money on this anymore. You know. And I think we'll finally get sick and tired of all the side effects of them. It's just people keep saying, you know, when the editor of the New England Journal of Medicine, our most prestigious journal in America, retires, and she retires because of the lousy manipulation of the pharmaceutical industry and all the papers being done, and saying, I can't stand any more of these statin studies. She says, there is such pollution of all the research process. It is so corrupt, I'm quitting. And not one ripple happened. Everything just kept going as usual. And you keep seeing 100,000 ads on television every day for another statin. And some cheerful person looking like they don't have erectile difficulty, which they do. Yes?
I was told to go on CoQ10 because of a statin, because the statin takes the CoQ10. So if you don't use a statin, you still need CoQ10? I mean, as part of your protocol?
Yeah, because you're over 50.
Okay.
I'm sorry, are you over 50?
Oh, my yes.
Oh, okay.
Very much so.
I'm sorry, I had a lapse there for a minute.
So what does CoQ10 do again? What is that?
CoQ10, a heart cell, a brain cell, every cell in your body has mitochondria in it. Mitochondria are your energy factories. In your energy factory, there's about, as you burn glucose and fat down into ATP molecules, on the electron transport chain, about 2% of the electrons are sometimes a particle and sometimes a wave. The Heisenberg uncertainty principle says we're never sure what they are. So the poor proteins that are handling these electrons occasionally lose one. About 2% of electrons get away from the electron transport chain. And when they do, they attach themselves to an oxygen, and that's called a free reactive oxygen species, a reactive oxygen species, an oxidant, for which you take an antioxidant. CoQ10 is sitting in their mitochondria, and it is designed to suck up that oxygen. It is designed to suck up that oxygen radical. And over age 50, you can measure. If you want to come to my office, I'll be happy to send off the blood test and show you. But if you're over 50, you ain't got any CoQ10 left. It's protecting the mitochondria in your heart. Now, the question is, what an impact does it have? And I'll give you one example of a clinical impact. My father had congestive heart failure. 50% of us will die with congestive heart failure. My father had congestive heart failure and had an ejection fraction of 20%. A healthy person, hopefully you have an ejection fraction of 65%. Okay, unless you've had a heart attack. If you have a heart attack, you might be 50%. You can live happily on 50. You can live happily on 40, but by 30, you're having a little trouble walking upstairs. By 20, you can't get out of your chair and walk across the room. You're going to live an average of 3 months. You're waiting for a heart transplant unless your last name is Cheney. Okay? So because you have such a badly injured heart. If you put I put my father on CoQ10, magnesium, ribose, and L-carnitine, and testosterone, and 6 months later, when I finally got them to do another ultrasound, his ejection fraction was 29%. There are no pharmaceutical drugs that will increase your ejection fraction 30%, like CoQ10, magnesium, ribose, and carnitine. The problem is they only cost $1 a day. It costs about $1 a day. Way too cheap. By the way, my father's still alive. This is 3 years later. He's still taking CoQ10, ribose, magnesium, and carnitine. And his ejection, unfortunately, he's 3 years older, so he's now, unfortunately, they're not having the same effect they once were. But it's given us 3 extra years of life with my father. You know, yes?
What dose would you prescribe for the ribose?
5 grams a day. Talk to Dan. He can help you out. Yeah, 5 grams. Dan's got a couple places of it. He's got a couple sources of it here. Yeah, my expectation is when I say good night now that you guys are going to just strip the shelves in here because that's home. So thank you for coming tonight. We'll keep you notice on future talks. So.